That seat isn't for a burden like you. Believe me, those words still echo in my ears exactly the way they did that day. It was my grandson's 7th birthday. The house was filled with balloons, colorful decorations, and the laughter of children. I had just settled into a chair with my plate when my daughter-in-law, Emily, walked over to me in front of everyone, rested her hand on the back of my chair, smiled, and said, "That seat isn't for a burden like you. It's reserved for our guests." Can you imagine it? The whole room went quiet for a single moment, and then several people laughed. Some looked away. Others acted like it was nothing more than a harmless joke. But the moment that hurt me the most was when I looked at my son, Jack. He just stood there. He didn't try to stop me. He didn't tell his wife to apologize. He simply stood there, watching the whole thing like it wasn't his problem. I didn't say a single word. Look, I've never been the kind of woman who screams or makes a scene. Maybe that's always been my greatest weakness, and my greatest strength. I quietly placed my plate back on the table, picked up my purse, and walked toward the front door. Behind me, I could hear the children saying, "Grandma's leaving." But no one tried to stop me. By the time I reached my car, my breathing had grown heavy. I sat behind the steering wheel with both hands resting on it for what felt like forever. The tears could have come, but they didn't. Sometimes a person is hurt so deeply that even tears give up. You know something? At my age, you don't need expensive gifts or constant compliments anymore. You just want respect. And that afternoon, it felt like the value of my entire life had been erased by one sentence. When I got home, I hung my coat on the hook and went straight into the kitchen to make coffee. That had always been my routine. Good day or bad day, there was always a warm mug waiting for me. I wrapped both hands around it, but I never took a sip. That evening, my friend Carol called. "Why did you leave the party so early?" I stayed quiet for a few moments. Then I softly said, "Sometimes silence speaks louder than an argument." She didn't answer right away either. The two of us had belonged to the same monthly book club for almost 10 years. Truthfully, we spent more time talking about life than discussing books. Sometimes we'd grab Starbucks before the meeting. Sometimes we'd sit in someone's backyard for hours. Those women were among the few people I felt safe enough to tell the truth. Carol finally said, "Come over tomorrow." The next morning, I drove to her house. She already had my favorite hazelnut coffee waiting for me. We sat in her backyard, surrounded by little white flowers swaying in the breeze. You're probably wondering if Emily had always been like that. No. When Jack first brought her home years ago, she seemed incredibly sweet. She thanked me for everything. She asked me for family recipes. She even stood beside me in the kitchen helping prepare Thanksgiving dinner. I truly welcomed her as my own daughter. When they bought their first house, I paid a large portion of the down payment. They promised, "Mom, we'll pay you back in a few years." I laughed and told them, "Family doesn't repay family." Looking back now, maybe that was the biggest mistake I ever made. Little by little, everything changed. Emily made new friends. They lived in expensive neighborhoods, drove luxury SUVs, and measured people by appearances. Suddenly every conversation became about image. Who had remodeled their kitchen? Which private school the kids attended? Whose backyard had the nicest pool? I still shopped at Target. I still clipped coupons. I still believed there was nothing embarrassing about being careful with money. One afternoon she laughed and asked, "You still use coupons?" I smiled and answered, "That's exactly how I was able to help pay for your house." She laughed. But there wasn't a single ounce of respect behind that smile. Jack changed too. He used to come over every Sunday for brunch. Then it became once a month. Eventually, he only called when he needed something. Sometimes he'd drop the kids off because they had dinner reservations. Sometimes he'd call and ask, "Mom, could you pick Liam up from soccer practice?" I always said yes. Why? Because he was my son. And maybe that's the mistake mothers make. We mistake love for obligation. After I retired, my life became simple. I went to the gym 3 mornings a week just to keep my knees moving. Once a month I attended book club. Every now and then I'd meet my girlfriends for a girls' night out that honestly felt like therapy more than entertainment. Those little routines kept me going. But to Jack and Emily, I was slowly becoming nothing more than free childcare. Whenever they had a PTA meeting, they called me. Whenever they planned a weekend getaway, the grandchildren stayed at my house. Whenever they moved furniture or needed help unpacking, I was expected to show up. But whenever it was time for the family picture, somehow I always ended up standing off to the side. Even then, I stayed quiet. I kept telling myself maybe I was overthinking things. Maybe next time would be different. Maybe they were just busy. Maybe. But how many times can a person lie to herself before the truth becomes impossible to ignore? As I walked out of the store with it, my heart felt light. I kept imagining the look on his face. I thought every dollar would be worth seeing him smile. I had no idea that at that same birthday party, my dignity would be crushed in front of everyone I loved. And that afternoon, when I quietly drove home, for the first time in my life, I started thinking about making a decision that wouldn't just change my future. It would change theirs too. At that moment, I had no idea that only 17 days later, those very same people would be standing at my front door. And for the very first time, there would be no pride in their eyes. Only fear. If this story touched your heart or reminded you that respect should never come with conditions, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more emotional, life-inspired stories. Your support truly means a lot. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.